Welcome everyone to Doodle to Doing. I'm your host, Karen Light, professional artist and creative productivity coach at How Doodle. Here we doodle discuss concepts and practical tips for helping you achieve your creative goals. This doodlecast is designed to be interactive, so please grab something to doodle on and doodle with to get the full experience as you follow along. A common picture we paint about creatives is that they create alone. They are holed up in their studio, conjuring up their genius on a page, a canvas, an instrument, etc. While I absolutely love to be alone in my studio, I don't know about you. The truth is that we don't become successful creatives alone. We need people, we need support, and we need to be supportive. Perhaps that feels a little scary or overwhelming if you're an introverted creative like me. Perhaps you've had some really bad experiences and you don't trust that things could be different. If so, even if you do feel alone, you are not alone. And today I'm speaking with my guest and fellow creative, Laura Gates-Lupton, about how we can get past those fears and build a true circle of support for your creative success. So I'm so excited to do this in person with you. How fun is that? It's a rare occasion, Zoom world, right? But I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about the type of creative you are.
Sure. Well, we did a doodle before and I was thinking this through and I realized I am a creative who loves words. So I love to write. I love vocabulary. When I was a kid, I used to love to read the dictionary and the thesaurus, and I still kind of do. And I edit. And I find editing to also be a very creative act.
Yeah, absolutely. And just speaking from knowing you, you're very creative in everything that you're doing too, right? Like I first met Laura as a money coach and, her approach is very creative. So it shows up in all kinds of ways. Maybe that's one of the reasons we connected, because you weren't just a money coach. You were like a creative human being, and not just telling me like, oh, here are the practical, logical ways to do it. Instead, it's more like, ooh, what creative ways can we do these things with you?
So that's one of the reasons I call myself a life and money coach, not just a money coach.
Yeah.
Because it's never just about the money.
Yeah, it never is, right? It never is. Yeah. Well, let's kick this off with a doodle. So if you are out there following along, I'm going to invite you to start in the center of a piece of paper. Maybe draw a little circle. That kind of, you're going to doodle within, but that has like lots of room around the edges, the outside of it too, because we're going to create a tool out of this today. All right. So in this circle, we're going to spend about a minute doodling. What does support feel like to you? What does really, if you think back to maybe a moment or a memory where you felt really taken care of or really supportive, what does that feel like? So just doodle for 60 seconds inside that circle. Oh my gosh, I think ours are really similar.
I wasn't looking at it.
I wasn't looking at it. So you just pulled your hand away. Don't look. So maybe if you do it in person, you also wind up doing the same thing. Well, Laura, I'll let you go first.
Okay.
What came up for you? Can you show our folks?
Well,
yeah.
Tiny hearts, just because for me, support is often about love. It's about just, and not necessarily like romantic love or anything like that, but more just loving kindness. And then I decided there should be some movement, so there's some little lines there.
I like that. Yeah, I agree. And I like that. I mean, it's interesting, right? Okay, so here's right? Like, so,
Okay, we're gonna put them up together.
I know, can you believe that? Like, literally, I promise we weren't looking. Yeah, I thought, first of all, the first thing I did was this yellow ring around it, because it just kind of feels like light and like really, yeah, it just feels like you can do things. Like, it feels, I don't know, that color just feels very positive to me. And then the second thing I drew was like the wind, because I do feel like sometimes one of the things that isn't actually supportive, but people think they're being supportive, is when they tell you what to do.
Right.
And the wind I see more as like flowing with you, or like in movement with you, or it's like, it's not so hard or structured. And then of course it's done with a lot of love, right? Like, just like you said, a lot of kindness, a lot of love, a lot of empathy,
Yeah.
and like belief in your ability to do something, like your ability, not they're gonna figure it out for you, but
Right.
your ability to do it. So,
Right. I also really like that it's in a circle. I know that's what you directed us to do, but to me, it's also about that space that gets created when you're really supported, you feel held within that space.
yeah, that's so true. Maybe it was my unconscious.
It could be.
choosing the circle.
Could be, but I really love that you did, because that felt really appropriate and really spot on.
Yeah, I love the symbolism of a circle. I'm glad you brought that up. Like, feels held, it feels inclusive, it feels welcoming, it feels like a safe space.
Yes.
Maybe that word safety is really important too, now that you said circle. Yeah, and you know, just to validate what many of us feel, right? Like, this isn't often what we feel when we go out into the world. Even places that are supposed to be safe don't feel that way.
Correct.
Yep. And that leads us into this next part. We're going to jump right into this next part of the doodle. So what I want you to do is create like a ring around that circle, like another circle, leaving space. Like I said, it's going to turn into one tool. So a ring around. And in this ring, I want you to doodle about like, what keeps you from getting the support that you need? Like, what's a barrier to your support? Or maybe not just one, but like, what are barriers to support? Several come up in my mind. So go ahead and doodle around in that next ring. What are the barriers to getting the support that you would like to have? All right, so here's what some of mine look like. I feel like it's not focusing very well today. Usually it's a better focus. There, we kind of got it. But yeah, I'm just thinking a couple of things that came up. The first is like feeling insecure, like what I'm wanting support in. Maybe I'm actually not very good in it. Like, if I think about artwork, it's very easy to fall into the trap of like, oh, my art's not as good as so and so, like comparing, and then feeling like, oh, why would they even want to support me in this? Like, I'm not that good anyway. So insecurity comes up that I'm doing it wrong or it's not good enough. And I think also, like, one of the things I did this like little list here, like 1, 2, 3, 4, like when people like try to fix it for me and be like, well, all you gotta do, this is all you gotta do is 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you just follow that step and you're fine. And you're like, did you think I haven't tried things like that before?
If I could do that, I would have done it.
And I've done it, or I've done it and it hasn't worked. Like both of those things, like it's not, like when it's almost like an insult, like, like it's just so simple. All you have to do is this. And I'm like, well, I'm really great at great, it's simple for you. And that really, really can stop me sometimes, just not wanting that kind of pressure or like, oh, I don't know, judgment. Feels like judgment. I also think like people are really busy and like I put blah, 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 because it's like kind of breaking through the noise of life. Like that's hard to do. And then I've also put like, I've been disappointed before. Like people have disappointed me and let me down. And nobody wants to feel that again. Those are 4 immediate ones. How about you? What comes up for you?
Well, it's interesting because I have these little squiggly lines which represent the noise in my own head and also the busyness of other people. And then I have the word fear there. And then I have the me with a question mark because it's really like, will I be understood? There are question marks up here too for the same reason.
Yeah.
That question of like, will anybody get it? Will I be understood? But also what you were saying around the insecurity and just the fear of that vulnerability of asking for help, asking for support.
That's such a good point. I mean, it is a very vulnerable, it sounds like a simple thing to do, right? And everybody says it all the time, which is why I want to do a podcast on to begin with, because it's like, oh, ask for support. Oh, ask for support, ask for support, get support, blah, 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 blah. But like what that actually entails is an incredible amount of, I think, bravery.
Oh, yeah.
And because you have to be in this very vulnerable place. Sometimes it hasn't been safe for us to admit that we don't know how to do something. Sometimes we've been ridiculed for our mistakes, for failing.
That something isn't going well.
Yeah, it's a reflection on your ability or capabilities in some way, shape, or form. So those are massive, massive root causes of why we, I think, withdraw.
Oh, yeah. And in the world of money, especially because I mostly work with women at midlife, they look around and think everybody else has got it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That's part of it too, is like, it's the admission of this isn't going so well for me.
Yeah. I haven't figured this out and I'm supposed to have.
Yes.
I'm wrong. I'm behind. I'm not where I should be. And I work with people all ages and, people as young as like high school think they're not where they should be. Like it starts very early. So just think about that. People are already having thoughts in high school that they are not where they should be in life, that they have not figured it out. And I could talk all day long about
So could I.
How school and society perpetuates that. But like, but we're going to stick with the fact that it exists, right? And that keeps us from getting the support we need in life. And yeah, I don't know. I think one of the things with creativity too, in general, speaking to that vulnerability piece, is that it is in and of itself a vulnerable thing. So it's kind of a double whammy.
Oh, yeah.
In the situation.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know, when I really make something, it's like, it's part of my soul. Like, I'm like, it's part of my soul out there. Like,
oh, yeah. I remember the first time I wrote a story for adults. I mostly wrote for kids back when I was a really active writer. And I brought this manuscript to a new critique group that was only for people writing for adults. And they tore it apart. Like, we really tore it apart. And it was like someone like ripping parts of my body off.
Yeah. Yes.
It was like, oh, it was so hard.
It is so hard. And I feel that way a lot from like, I still have like critique trauma from college. I don't know if any of you have gone to art school or had critique trauma in other ways too. Like Laura was just explaining, but like, I don't always think it's done well.
Right.
Like people just show up to critique, but I think there's skill involved in that, and that there should be ground rules and guidelines, and not only in how you critique, but also in like how you present your work to be critiqued. Like, I remember this one time, it was in college, and a friend was just asking a couple of her friends, like, something's off about this painting. Like, can you look at it for me? And I remember somebody said something, and it was not a bad thing, right? But she was like, oh, this arm is really big, and that wasn't what the problem was for her. Like, she was like, no, that's fine. Like, I don't need the arm to be proportional. That's not what my art is about. Like it, and that in fact helps this, blah, blah, blah. And what we finally got to was what she actually wanted to be critiqued on, which was like, she was feeling off about the kind of the composition of the piece versus like the proportions. And so I think it also is one of those things that I want to dive in with you in this conversation and this next ring we're going to do, which is like, how do we ask for support? Like, how do we get the support that feels like the part we put in the middle, right?
Right.
Like that
Yeah.
piece of it.
Yeah, well, when I ran a critique group for years.
Mhm.
It was for children's writers. We had a structure that we used
Good for you.
around like what people would specifically say what they were looking for. So it could be around dialogue, it could be around plot, it could be whatever they wanted.
Mhm.
And we did the sandwich, critique, which is we pointed out what we really loved about it. We then pointed out things that we thought needed work, and then we pointed out something we loved about it.
Yeah.
And that really, I mean, it sounds silly, but having gone to other critique groups, I realized what a huge difference it made.
It does.
There are twice as many positive comments as there
Mhm.
are critique when you do
Yeah.
it that way.
And I think when somebody starts off with something good, it like softens you. It's like, it like creates, it helps you be in a more receptive place.
Yes.
Because I mean, that support isn't always like everything is great and you're wonderful and this is fantastic, right?
Right.
Support also can be like, hey, heads up, that's not such a good direction for you. But if it's couched in love, which is what I think the sandwich helps it do,
Yes.
then it's like, okay, I'm willing to listen to you. Okay, I know you're here for my highest good. Like, I know that you want me to succeed versus like, you're just trying to find fault with me.
Right. Well, and you feel more seen,
Mhm.
right? So if people start off by saying something that they really love about your work or what you've done, you feel automatically like, oh, they see me.
Yeah.
They see what I've done.
Mhm.
And so then you are open to hearing the thing that and you're there because you want to make it better.
Right. Right. Yes.
And then when they end with something positive, it also feels like, oh, see, I'm still being seen again.
Yeah.
And also I think it helps to validate the criticism, because if you agree with what they love,
Mhm.
you can see that too, then it makes you think maybe their criticism is worth paying attention to.
That's true. Oh, I like that. That's so, yeah. It's so good. And I mean, I even read research recently that says the most, and this is in terms of like relationships, right, in marriages, but like I think it applies everywhere, which is because I come to think of it, I've also heard it talked about in the workplace, which is successful relationships, the ratio of positive to negative is 5 to 1.
Mhm.
5 to 1 is mentioning 5 positive aspects to 1 challenging one.
Because we all hear the negative one.
Those we all hear the negative
Those are the
ones.
ones we hang on to.
That negative bias, right? Like
Yep.
it really sticks out. It's like, oh yeah, again, getting to this like keeping ourselves safe thing. So
Yeah, 30 people could tell you your painting is amazing, and one person can come in and be like, wow, I don't like this at all. What are you gonna remember?
and then like for 2 days, you're like, oh, oh, I know. I mean, it's tough. It's tough. It's tough to put yourself out there and ask for the support. So we're gonna do the next step in this tool right now, which is gonna go straight to the edges of it. And I just want you to, along the edges of your paper, I want you to draw like, it's good to start with where you're at, with what's actually around you. Like sometimes you might get overwhelmed thinking, oh, I got to build this whole network of support. But sometimes like it could be the negative bias thing. You're not seeing what's actually right in front of you. And that's the best place to start for support. So I want you to think about what people or resources or organizations or anything that does feel supportive right now in your life, or could be supportive. Maybe you're not using it as well as you could yet, but like it has potential, right? And I want you you can draw something that represents that, or like write it along like the borders of your paper. Okay, just take a second. for me, a thought just popped in my head. I'm like, is that supportive? And I just wrote it down out of
Mhm.
curiosity.
I just did the
So
exact same
yeah,
thing.
like if there's a little like it pops in your head, maybe just be curious. Doesn't mean you have to, but could be interesting. Maybe you just have one or two, that's okay. Or maybe you have 10, that's fabulous too. Somewhere in the middle is where I came to. How was even just doing that little exercise for you?
Good. I think what tripped me up at first was like, should I write everybody's names out? Because there's a long list actually. And so I did not do that, but
Mhm.
that's what I was like, what, how do I even put this in here?
Yeah. And maybe as we develop the tool, one or two might come out and become clear for you as like a next step or an idea. But I did the same thing. Well, I put my partner, he's the only name on here. He seems to be in a category in and of itself since he has to live with me all the time. But other than that, yeah, I do have some more buckets of like family. I put Sister Mind, which is a group I'm in with Laura. I go to like a creative meeting about once a week called Creative Juice. So I put that down. The one that made me go, is like my authors and my clients.
I almost put clients and I didn't. I was like holding off, but they are very supportive.
It's interesting, right? Like there's a lot of curiosity in that one for me. My family, of course, and friends, and then also I put my cats. And I don't think we should underestimate our pets and support system. Yeah, anything else show up for you that you want to mention?
Yeah, I mean, I have friends, family, colleagues. I said sisters for Sister Mine. And I put my kids and I put Creative Juice because I go to the same group. And I put home because home has shifted for me, but I do feel like where I live is a very supportive space.
I just put home. I love that. Like like I'm gonna put home/studio. Ooh, I love that. Yes. Maybe this give you some ideas. That's sharing. I mean, play off each other. Okay, so now we got some space between that second ring and those people. And that's because what I want to have a conversation with Laura about is really like the various ways we can cultivate more support in our lives. And I want you to think about like if one of them is really ringing true for you, you can kind of like create a little line for yourself out to it and maybe write some notes or do a picture. But eventually what happens, right, when we do this is we start seeing like, oh my gosh, I do have a web of support. There is people around me. So you can draw the lines ahead of time if you want to and write in between, play. Use your creative license, however you want to develop this tool. But I want, it can be so effective to have a visual representation of the truth and to remind yourself during those moments where you feel really unsupported. This could be a little visual cue, a visual reminder for you, like there is some kind of web, there is some kind of net for me to lean into. What could that look like for me right now? So that's the goal with this little tool. And so let's talk about that. Like, what are some ways, Laura, that, another thing I should mention about Laura is she has an extensive background in therapy, psychotherapy, social work. So she's helped a lot of people. One of the reasons I just love that she want to talk about this with us. You've had extensive experience, I'm sure, helping people get the support they need and be the support that they need. So what have you noticed tends to come up a lot or things that have worked for folks?
Can I start with what doesn't work?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because I also worked on a hotline throughout the pandemic as the mental health expert. And the thing that doesn't work is neglecting it. And that came up over and over again with the people who would call us of all ages, but who were very alone because they had thrown themselves into work, for example, and hadn't built up their social relationships. And then when everybody was working from home, they lost the only network they had, essentially.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
That's so true. I think work from home person already had something, but if you weren't,
right,
I could see how your whole network would be gone. Yeah.
Gone. Yeah. And so I think diversifying, having lots of different sources of support and actively cultivating it, not neglecting it. Yeah. Is really important. And we're not particularly good at that.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, I feel like we should flesh out maybe what that's looked like for us. I'm not going to say I'm an expert. There's a lot of support that I still want to get and learn to ask for. But when I think about like what has worked in terms of cultivation or what things I have done, one of the things that comes up for me is creating a structure for it. I remember a mentor shared with me a while ago that if I really wanted to build some new friendships, that I should, first of all, take the brave step and telling somebody that that was what was important to me and that it mattered to me that we have a relationship. And then secondly, like setting up some sort of regular thing with them. Whether it's a monthly thing or a weekly thing, or you go for a walk or something, just like a structure, because then you don't have to keep asking.
Right.
And things get in the way, right? Like just figuring out the schedule and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, like kind of creating that upfront with them and then treating it as a bit sacred.
Yes.
Like sure, there'll be exceptions every now and then, but usually they're not many,
Right. Absolutely. And I've just had to recreate that because
Yes.
I moved 500 miles from where I was living, and I have very close friends there that I was seeing regularly. We had regular things we were doing together. So now we're on the phone, but we are committed to, every other week we get on the phone and we talk, so that we don't lose that connection.
But so, I think maybe everybody could even think of someone that they would wish they could see more or talk to more. And let's take a minute just to, I love where this conversation has brought us to think about, is there somebody that maybe you'd like to see more consistently or talk to more consistently and what that might look like for you? So let's take a minute and think about that and add it to our web. Yeah, you got some?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what else I was thinking about?
What?
I haven't thought about this in a while. I still do it, but I just haven't thought about it in a while. But I remember talking a lot with my therapy clients back when I was a therapist about how I literally kept a list of the people who were important to me that I wanted to stay in touch with regularly. And it wasn't because I would forget about them necessarily. It's just that my life was so busy. I had 3 young children. I was homeschooling them. I was working in a clinic 3 days a week as a therapist. And it's easy for those relationships to be pushed toward the back. It's like, it's not representative of how much I cared about them.
Yeah.
It's just that I had all these other must-dos. And so I literally would keep that list and go look at one every once in a while and be like, oh, I haven't been in touch with Peggy for a while. I need to send her an email. That kind of thing, because it's so easy to take all of that for granted.
It really is. It really is. And I think, one of my struggles sometimes is, okay, we're already trying to carve out time to create what we want to create. And then we got to carve out time for the people we want to see. And sometimes, and that's alongside whatever we're doing to make money, which sometimes it overlaps and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes I feel that real push-pull between like, it's the weekend, I want to see people, or I just want to be in my studio.
Yes.
And I have to kind of think about that. I have to really think through that, or I have to say no to things sometimes that make me very sad to say no to. And then other times I say yes, and it's the best thing I did was say yes, because that gave me energy. And so, yeah, that ability to just have that, I drew a little list on mine because I love that idea of just having a list so that you can think through it a little bit. Like, how long has it actually been since I've seen so-and-so?
Yeah.
Like, would that be a really good idea if I want to continue this friendship?
Right.
Maybe that moves it up the priority list a little.
It doesn't even have to be seeing. If you're super busy, it could be texting. It could be sending somebody a text or a box or messages saying, hey, I've been thinking of you, or you just popped into my head. What's going on?
Yes.
Let's set up a time. It could be 3 weeks from now. Get it on the calendar. It doesn't have to be in the middle of a really busy season.
And I think that's really important too, is to not worry about how far away you have to schedule it.
Yes.
Sometimes that keeps me from scheduling. I think, oh, I can't do this for several weeks, and then I feel bad, and then I don't respond. Instead of being like, sorry, I really can't do over the next couple of weeks. What are you doing in 3 or 4 weeks from now? And nobody ever cares when I do it, but I realize that it will stop me sometimes from responding. So it's like a reminder for myself to just go ahead and do it.
Yeah, it won't happen otherwise. That's the thing. It's like you can't just expect that these things will somehow show up on our calendars if we don't actively put them there.
And I also just love what you said, though, that it could just be a text. Like, do you have to have a whole thing scheduled if that's where you're at? I absolutely love leaving people voice texts. Like, that has changed my world. Not everybody loves receiving them, I don't think.
I love them.
I know you do. And not everybody, sometimes I wish more people would send me them back because I think they're great. And like,
it's so nice to hear somebody's actual voice and intonation and
like, just let it ramble and be natural. And like, it's couched in like, oh, I just, took a drink of water and burped or something, it's like, oh, it's a human. There's a human over there. So yeah, these things like, and that's where our creativity can really come into play, right? Like, it doesn't have to look like one thing or another.
Even getting something in the mail. I mean,
I was literally just gonna say that.
You've sent me so many really nice things in the mail.
I like it.
When I was living in New York, and I still have all of them.
Yeah,
all of them, because it meant so much to me.
It's so fun to get things in the mail, and I can do it when I want to be alone in my studio and still think of people, and then send them evidence that I'm thinking of them. Right?
Yeah.
Like, how beautiful is that? Oh, so yeah, just really letting yourself be curious and creative around how you might want to connect. One thing that I was just thinking about, we have a mutual friend, Linda, and something that really has come up for both of us really strongly lately is this new commitment to the place that art making has in our lives. It's always been part of our lives, but like, we're creating more space for it, that both of us really are.
Which is really fun to see.
I know, and we're both like, okay, how are we going to get it out there more? And like, we're just really in this, I've done a lot in illustration world for the last 15 years, but like not so much in the fine arts world. And so I've been really re-entering that, and Linda's really re-entering that. And what came into my head is like, we should just have regular art sharing. Like, like, who else to be more excited about you that you just created a piece of artwork and you finished it?
Yeah.
Because my goodness, we all have graveyards of unfinished work, right? It can celebrate. I think support sometimes feels like somebody's celebrating with me, saying like, I get that that's an accomplishment. Well done. I don't think we ourselves take enough time to celebrate. And so when we have somebody else that we can show up and do that with, it really like, it makes you stop for a moment and say, I did something, I achieved something, it happened. Like, so
it's funny you should say that, because I'm on Be Real. Do you know the app Be Real?
I do not.
So it's this crazy app where it goes off once a day, and you're supposed to take a picture of wherever you are.
Oh.
And it takes both sides. So it's a selfie, but it also takes what you're looking at.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, and then anybody that's in your Be Real network can see what you're up to in that moment. Yeah, so I'm only on there with one friend.
Okay.
She convinced me to get on there so
Okay.
we could see what each other does. And she's a very close friend. She was with me for the births of all 3 of my kids. So we were on Be Real, and the other day thing went off and I was putting laundry away. So that's what I took a picture of. And she wrote back, with all these like congratulatory things. And I was like, we're putting laundry away? And she's like, yes, everybody should be celebrated if they actually put the laundry away.
I hate putting laundry away. It's like my least favorite chore. While making the bed, putting laundry away.
It was such a cool right?
Yes. Yeah, I love, so Be Real. Be Real can be another way you connect with people. I have to totally check that out.
And I get on there, be sure to friend me.
Okay, I will. And it's like, I like that idea too, because I feel like a lot of times, like social media, let's just talk about that for a second. Like, I feel like we get on it in the hopes of connection, but very rarely is it the real kind of support that we're craving.
Right.
And I would use the word craving, or community that we're craving,
It can be, like,
It totally
I
can
have
be.
some private groups that I'm a part of on Facebook
Mm.
that absolutely, like, people are raw and real, and most of us have some kind of common denominator, because that's what the group was created around.
Yeah,
And yeah, it can be beautiful, but for the like sort of general feed, I
yeah.
don't see that.
And I wonder about that. Like, I wonder because there is, I think, one of the benefits of social media sometimes is that we don't have to leave where we are. There is a little bit of separation. So if we're feeling really nervous about being vulnerable, there's like a little bit of a separation there.
Mm.
But you also, it doesn't feel good and it can reinforce really bad feelings of loneliness or not being supported if you put something out
Yes.
there and then nobody likes it, nobody comments on it, and that just like can reinforce some really bad voices. So I wonder if one of the things we can think about too is just like how we can intentionally use social media, like finding those private groups on Facebook, like knowing, like tagging somebody if you want their feedback or support, or, just how can you use it or writing it in such a way that asks people to do something
Specific.
yeah.
And I think, message people directly,
Mhm.
not just posting.
Yeah. Like,
And not scrolling. Like, if you're in a really hard place, it's probably better not to scroll through everybody else's posts, because most people post positive stuff.
yeah.
It's like it's very curated.
And I would say that too, for you to curate your social media, that made a big difference when I started like not unfriending, but unfollowing. Or yeah, I find it easier to do that on Facebook than like Instagram and stuff, but like it did change a lot. I mean, my Facebook feed it's full of like, I mean, except for the stupid ads. Let's be real about that.
there are a
Those
lot of
ads
them.
have just become overwhelming, and I don't know, sometimes who knows how long I'll be on that, but it does have really positive things like the groups. So
Yeah, that's why I stay.
it's looking for the positive aspects, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
The other thing too is, being aware of who your audience is. So I have a list of people I post to. I sometimes post to everybody, but because where I grew up is incredibly conservative and I am not, I don't post things that they're gonna just automatically respond to, and I don't want those responses. I have a curated list of people that the posts go out to.
How cool is that? I didn't even know that was a thing.
It takes time to set up because you have
Okay.
to literally move people off the list.
Yeah,
But I'm so glad I have it,
right.
because there's safety there to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So I want to share, especially if it's something vulnerable around, like, I have a transgender child. And so if I want to post something around that, I don't want it going to everybody.
No, yeah, absolutely. And even the process of setting that up, I could see how that would be really a good experience for being intentional about creating your support system, right?
Thinking through who are those inner circle people that you're okay with seeing these more vulnerable posts.
Yeah.
And who are not.
And that's what kind of all these suggestions keep coming back to, right? Is like this intentionality. Sometimes I think a big barrier to creating it is just thinking it's going to happen for you. And I think a lot of people get stuck after school. Because if you went to a school, if you weren't homeschooled, some of those situations were awful and like had very bad school experiences, but also like oftentimes there's just a circle of people that you're around and you find people within that to fit, and instant community. One of the things that I'm thinking about as an artist too, that I just think is so important, is to be around other artists. Like if you are creative, the way you see the world is going to be different than some people. And if you're only showing up around folks who think really differently than you, it can have a really challenging impact, right?
Yeah.
Like you could think you're wrong, the way you think about things is wrong, you're just weird, you don't fit in.
You're an outsider.
People don't get you, you can't be understood. Like all of those sort of core challenging beliefs like can really stem from you not being around like-minded,
finding your people.
Yeah, your tribe.
Yeah. And it takes trial and error.
It does.
It does. It means having conversations with people and deciding like whether you actually have that connection or not.
And putting yourself out there in ways that say like, I am a creative. I do this kind of thing, or I like this, or this is how I think, I remember when we both have creative juice on our list. Yeah. which is a great, group that meets locally. And I probably stared at Creative Juice on Facebook for months before deciding to join a meeting. So that's the other thing too, is like, your first step might just be identifying it, but then give yourself a little grace and be patient and gentle in the process of stepping towards it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have gone if you hadn't taken me
There
there.
you go.
And even that morning when I got up and was getting dressed, it's like, why am I doing this? I don't actually need to go meet people in person. But it was my first
Yeah.
in-person networking thing since the pandemic. And
Yes.
and I'm an extrovert.
Yeah.
I'm usually very happy meeting people,
I'm
but I just hadn't done it in so long.
Yeah.
So, and I knew
It's a
we had to
muscle.
talk for 10 minutes. So I was like, I could do this.
Yes, it's a
It is a
muscle.
muscle.
It's a muscle. It's a muscle. It's like, if you start lifting weights, you're not going to go to the 50-pound weight. You're going to be at like 2 or 3, and try some stuff and see what happens. So I'm an introvert. I always tell people I'm an introvert who's learned a lot of extroverted skills. Like, but it's like a skill that can also, like, your muscles can atrophy, your
Sure.
skills can atrophy. And I
Comfort
always
level can atrophy.
Huh?
Comfort level.
Yes, like it really changes.
Yes.
And I like that we're talking about this because I think it's so important. We think, oh, I'm just not good at that thing. Well, you can get good.
Oh, yeah.
And getting good is a process.
Yes.
Nobody starts anything good. It might not feel natural to you at first, but eventually it will, and I would say most mornings before I go to Creative Juice, I'm like, oh, I don't really want to go today.
I'm the same way.
I don't really want to go. Like, I feel like
We've never admitted this.
we've never admitted this to each other. Because when we go, we have such a good time.
It's like,
There's wonderful people
I'm so
there.
glad to be here every single time. I think I am so glad to be here.
Yes.
It's hard for me to get out the door.
I think these people get me. I can just be myself. I'm not some weirdo here. Like, I don't have to explain myself so much. And then I leave and I'm like inspired. Like last Monday I left. I didn't even look at my email for hours. I was like, I don't care about anything. I had to go to my studio and make stuff. So like, that's such an important, that's a real true indicator for me of support, is when it inspires me to do the things that matter.
Yeah.
It inspires me. It's not taking away from them in any way. It's not convincing me that they're not important. It like bolsters everything that's important to me.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. We talked a tiny bit at the very beginning related to intentionality about being specific about what you're looking for in support.
Mhm.
But I think there's something else too that I want to be sure we mention.
Yeah.
Which is being direct with people about like, I want to be your friend.
Mhm.
Like I met with a young woman last week. We were alumni of the same school, and she reached out to me and said, I'm started this new business as a financial advisor. We have a similar background in mental health. And she said, I'm wondering if we could meet. I'm really looking for a mentor.
Yeah.
And we met, we really connected. She's like, can we be friends? Like, can we exchange numbers? Can we start staying in touch? And I said, absolutely. I'd really like that.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that she was so direct about it.
Mhm. Yeah, because it's hard to be supportive of somebody else, which I think is an important part. Like, you're in a support system if you're also supportive.
Yes.
So, and you feeling like you're supportive will make it easier to ask for support. You will feel like you have value to bring, but it's really hard to be a supportive person if you're questioning what they need from you.
Right.
Like if she wouldn't have said, oh, will you be my friend? You might have thought maybe she wants coaching from me, or maybe
Right.
she wants nothing else from me, or maybe
Right.
she didn't like the way the conversation went. Maybe I wasn't even helpful, like now you know where you stand and what she wants
Right.
from that
Well,
situation.
and I do tend to err on the side of not necessarily being like a mentor toward people if they haven't asked me for it, because
Right.
that can be so patronizing.
It can be. We don't want to mentor somebody who hasn't asked for that.
It's
No.
the worst thing in the world to have
No.
somebody swoop in with all this advice you haven't asked for.
Advice. Can we
Right?
take advice for a second? I think advice is rarely supportive.
If it's not asked for, I
Yes. Like, thank you for clarifying. Unsolicited advice.
Yes. Oh, I think it feels like veiled criticism.
Yes. You're doing it wrong is what I hear. When people give me an unsolicited, you're wrong. You don't know how to do this.
Yes.
Let me. And I work a lot. Okay. I work a lot with like the really interesting age of like college students,
Mhm.
who have to like individuate and separate from their parents and find their own way. And parents who are used to, for a lot of reasons, really being supportive to their kids. Maybe they've struggled with, mental health issues, executive function issues, learning differences. And so they're very used to like being like having the reins. And so they just keep getting advice. But the thing is that they hired me, right? They hired me to be a coach. And it takes a minute sometimes, and these are wonderful people, well-intentioned, beautiful, wonderful parents, people. But it takes a second for them to realize that as a coach, I'm not just continuing their message.
Right.
Like I'm actually there to help the client find their own way, to find their own path in the world,
Yes.
and that, so you might feel that way with somebody in your life. And it's a really, one of the things I do on the client end is start building a list of what they do that does feel supportive to you. So you can point this out and be like, that's supportive, because what they want more than anything is to be supportive. They just don't know how yet.
Yes.
It's a new role. There's a new dynamic that has to happen. There's a new role. And that happens in those kinds of situations, but this happens, it can happen in a long-term relationship, it can happen with friends, like things change. And suddenly the way they were supporting you is no longer feeling supportive.
Right. Well, we all evolve.
Yeah.
That's part of our process.
Yeah.
Right. And so if the person who is supporting you doesn't recognize and maybe they don't, maybe you haven't made it explicit. Either, right.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to literally tell people, I don't need help with that anymore.
Yes.
Like I've gotten good at this.
Yeah.
Or that's not part of my life anymore, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And as a parent, I will say, because my kids are all in the exact age group you just talked about, it does take some tongue biting.
Absolutely. I mean, you think I'm not over here as a coach, not biting my tongue? Like, oh my gosh, no judgment. That's hard.
One of my kids has an employment issue right now. He's telling me about it and did not ask for my advice. And I just sat there quietly, but boy, was it hard. I had some opinions, I had some thoughts, but.
And if you're that person, like if you like to be a helper, if you like to offer up ideas, that can be a simple way to be supportive, is just say, I have an idea. Can I share it with you?
Would that be helpful?
Would that be helpful for you? Would that feel supportive? And be ready for them to say no. It's okay if they say no. I know in my relationship with my partner, I often distinguish, and we're getting better at asking each other too. Like, I just need listening, or I want you to help me brainstorm. Like those to me are two very different modes. And sometimes, and the both of us tend to be fix-it people. So the both of us actually jump into solution, like let's figure it out solutions. But both of us sometimes are just like so frustrated, and it's because we needed to be listened to. And listening can be the most supportive, and you can ask for just listening. Like, again, we're going back to being heard.
I need to be heard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, people like us who professionally are helpers.
Yes.
Right. It can be hard too, not to want to jump in, especially if you feel like I can see a solution here. But if the person isn't ready to hear a solution,
you're creative and you're like, I got some ideas for you. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm dying.
I'm feeling overwhelmed already. I don't need that,
Yeah.
It's so important to know what the person needs or wants, because otherwise you're just making it worse.
So what I want to do to finish up this tool, so you're walking away with some really, some solid ideas of what you can do to kind of cultivate, and maybe some new thoughts will also come up as Laura and I do this, but thinking about maybe picking a person or two or an aspect or two and thinking through creatively, maybe doing a doodle there so that your creative capacities are opened up a little bit more of how you can continue to cultivate that for yourself. So let's take a minute to we'll do 2 minutes thinking through a couple of these aspects around the outside and doodle about how you might cultivate more support. a few more seconds. I've got some good ideas brewing over here. How about you?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Yeah, can I ask what some ideas came up for you?
Well, I want to remind myself, so I made a little list here that, that's always worked really well for me in the past, and I want to do more of it, is keeping a list of the people that I want to stay in touch with. Especially because it's grown over time, so that also adds to it, right? And also using my calendar, because that also really helps to actually, so when my friend calls me, for example, spontaneously, put it on my calendar, so then later I can look back and remember when we last talked.
Oh, that's a good idea. Usually we think about scheduling ahead, but like, that's a really good idea.
Because my life is so busy, I can think, oh, I just talked to Jody 2 days ago, right? But if I put it on my calendar, I can look and see it's been 10 days.
Yeah.
And it's time for another conversation. So that, and then this is kind of silly, but this is my window to the sky, which is when I fly, my favorite thing is looking at the sky, and so I'm just booking trips to visit people. I mean, in a couple weeks, I'm going to go visit our friend Linda in Dallas.
Yes.
And I want to also schedule some other people too that live in a variety of places, and my kids. So,
Oh, I'm totally putting a car in here. Like road trips.
Mhm.
Oh, they're so much fun. And I realized that I need to book my next one back to Chicago.
Yeah.
Because that is a home base for me as well.
Yep. And as we're talking about it, I'm also realizing I want to book something for my birthday, which is in January.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That sounds really good.
Yep.
That sounds really good. It's one of the things that I'll do sometimes. The calendar just reminded me of is like, after I talk to somebody, I will put a reminder on my calendar for so long from them to like check in or remember or ask or whatever it is I need to do. And that really helps me because it goes so fast.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes time.
Well, if someone tells me something's coming up, like a surgery or some other event that I want to be sure I remember to check in with them around, I put that on my calendar too.
I think that's a wonderful thing to talk about too with cultivating these connections. It's like what's important to the people that are important to you.
Yes.
And how do you remember that or show them that you're there for them during those times,
Yeah.
The people who do that for me, like I think about them, I really feel supported by them. And, I also try to do that in return. And, sometimes I really suck at certain things like remembering birthdays or something like that, but I know I'm really good at remembering other things. So I try not to be I'm like things that maybe they're not used to people remembering,
Right.
So keeping up with that stuff, what's important to them.
Yes.
How did that big day go for them that they've been worried about? Or
Yep. Right before we got on here, my cousin texted me because I sent him a text this morning asking how his follow-up appointment went yesterday because he had surgery a week ago.
Yeah.
And he's home. He's always works 2 jobs and he's home for like 7 weeks on medical leave. And I know that that's really hard for him. So I want to be checking in regularly to ask about how he's doing medically, but also just with this big long break from work.
Yeah. There's a lot of emotions in that part.
Yep.
It's hard. It's like whenever we go from doing a lot of things to doing nothing, there's always the mind can play there.
Yeah, but I also want to take advantage of the fact that he has time. So
That's true.
the other day we texted with each other for about an hour.
It's
It
not
was
so much fun.
great. I know we normally don't do that.
Yeah.
So I also, there's that side of it too.
It's wonderful. One thing that a couple things that I have going, with my partner, so not showing up very well, but anyway, there's a lot of question marks and post-it notes. I love that. A question that we just started getting in we're not even in the habit, so I'm not even gonna use that phrase yet, but we just started asking each other, on the beginning of the week for the last 2 weeks, on Monday is like, how can I support you this week?
Oh, I love that.
And I got it from the Gottmans, like, I don't know, from the Gottman Institute. And I just thought it was brilliant. It's so simple, and it could be something that you also, now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how great would it be to ask that question to several of my friends or like my business besties and like people who I know are, out here like me trying to do stuff on our own and creative folks. But asking that question to each other, it's like, it acknowledges that every week that could look differently. Every week you could be somewhere else, like he started a new job a couple weeks ago and he's like, can you make me breakfast? Because he has to get up earlier than he's used to. It puts him in a bad mood. He's not great with time management. Like, so me making him breakfast like helped, and I'm like, yes, I can make
Well,
him
how nice
breakfast,
to have a concrete thing you can
It's
do.
so concrete. It was a great example. It was a really good answer. You're so right on that. He's like, what can I do for you? And I was like, actually, I said that week, I was like, you can give me more hugs.
Mhm.
Like, I just want more hugs. And so, they can also be supportive in lots of different ways. Or you could say like, I just need you to, validate what I do this week, or I need you to help me brainstorm about something, or, like I need you to go with me somewhere. That was mine this week. Like, I just need you to go with me to this event,
I love that. I absolutely love that.
And it's great too, because sometimes what we need from the other person isn't easy for the other person. Like, I didn't necessarily love to get up. Like, I don't like to do anything when I get up for a while. Like, I just make a cup of coffee and sit in a daze and read books for an hour. And like, I had to get up and do something, and that just, it's not my favorite thing. So, but I was so willing to do that because I know, first of all, it's not gonna be every day. And secondly, like how supportive that was for him. I asked him to go to this event with me. He gets really impatient after a while, but he was like, I could just see him like using his tools to stay engaged, do his thing. So
I love
people, and that's what shows you that somebody can be a good support, not because they're always gonna be able to do it for you, but when it really matters, they will,
Yeah.
The other thing that came up strong for me is for creative juice. It's me showing the art.
Yes.
I like to show more of my artwork there. I know it's been a little challenging. I've been biking lately there, so like, putting a canvas on my bike is hard.
Yeah.
But even like, I don't know, finding ways of showing it or sharing it. Maybe it's not even at the meeting, maybe it's another way, but I would like to share more because it really does feel so supportive. Like, people are like, well done, and like, not that you need smoke blowing up your ass, right? But like, you need some, like you were saying, you need those positive comments. Like, you're all by yourself. You don't know half the time,
Yeah.
how other people are gonna respond. So,
And it's a gift to those of us that you're showing it to. Like,
thanks for saying that.
it is. And I always think too that it's context. Like, when people talk about their work, especially because I'm one of the few who is not like a visual artist, I'm a
Yeah.
writer. When people talk about their work, I don't always know exactly what they mean, but if they bring it and show it, then I know what they mean, and it gives me context. So
It does.
it's another way to get to know somebody.
It really is. And I love it when people ask me questions about it. That's, because the meaning of my work is so not just does it look good, but like the meaning, like that's where I get really lit up. And so when people ask me about like what it means, I'm like, oh, this is good. This is then the art is facilitating the conversation that I want to have, which is the reason I make the art to begin with, the conversation with myself and other people that I want to have. And I think asking for like some one-to-ones from those folks,
That's a great idea.
somebody just said to me, like, why don't we meet up for half an hour beforehand? And I was just like, why haven't we done that? Like, why am I not doing that with more people? Like, that is great.
That is a great idea.
Oh, well, I hope that you have gotten some ideas on how to cultivate your circle. Certainly, if you want to brainstorm anything, shoot us a message in the comments and we will do that for sure. Because like I said at the beginning, as much as I love being alone, like this kind of thing matters. It matters so much. And I'm just so happy we could do this in person for an episode like this. And I really hope that you'll take a few moments if you want to connect with Laura. You can do that. She's a Substack. That's awesome. It's called Good with Money. And because she's a writer, you'll enjoy the writings. It's not boring, I promise. It's full of story and deep compassion and empathy and ideas and well-written stuff. I love reading your weekly Monday missives.
Thank you.
You could also connect with her through her podcast. She has a wonderful podcast called Women Uncaged with a friend of ours, Linda Katz, who I mentioned earlier. And that's a great podcast for all things like breaking out of the cages that keep you from being your full wild woman self. Or you can connect with her on LinkedIn, and I'll include all of that stuff in the show notes of this episode. Oh my gosh, thanks for being here.
Thank you. This has been so much
fun.
fun.
So much fun. Grab somebody you love and give them a hug like we just did. I really am here to be a part of your support network. Don't hesitate to reach out. We'll find some ways to get you on the road to helping you feel more supportive in your creative journey. And thanks so much for joining us to our creative evolution and revolution. And until next time, bye everyone.